Hello, everyone. On April 15th, Dr. Phillips, Dr. Patrick Phillips, and I, and Greg, and a whole bunch of other guests will be hanging out in Mississauga. And we'd love for you to join us. We will be talking about insider stories from the medical world, from a paramedic, a nurse, and this doctor, as well as just kind of talking about what's happening in Canada. And we're really excited. I'm really excited. Greg's really excited. And I'm sure, Patrick, are you really excited?
I am. Yeah, I'm looking forward
Good.
to it.
Yeah, live events are things that have not been too ubiquitous, too much happening in the last couple of years. So I'm excited to see people in person. One of the things, it's going to be an hour and a half conversation. It's going to be very interactive. There's going to be some audience questions as well. I've got three questions for you today. One, what's your most worrying thing that's kind of happened or happening in our world in Canada right now?
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I would say the most worrying thing, especially from the medical perspective, is the absolute reversal of normal medical ethics. So, and I'll just pick one, which
Sure.
is informed consent, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of gone out the window. Like prior to 2020, it was like doctor would never touch a patient without getting informed consent, right?
Right.
And now obviously, with the vaccine mandates, that has been thrown out the window, but it's spread even further beyond that
Yeah.
to loss of respect a lot of times with patients when they go into the hospital. Um, Doctors normally have to get informed consent from their next of kin. And often that didn't happen through COVID. Through
Really?
separating people from the rest of their families, they just made decisions on their own, or even violated some of those decisions. As some people have told me, at least um, by phone, have kind of been horrified that their family member was given remdesivir when they told them not to give it to them.
Wow. And so they
So
were actually going against the express wishes of the family.
yeah, and
Unbelievable.
I feel like that's a trend, right? Because as soon
Mhm.
as you start forcing medical treatments on people, and they didn't have to give, like that doctor and that nurse didn't give informed consent for that vaccine, so it becomes a cultural thing of,
Yeah.
well, like then they don't feel the need to offer that informed consent to their patients, and so I do feel like that is a trend that is building.
Yeah. Very
Um,
scary. Um, and
yeah.
something, man, it's funny because you and I, when we have before, I've interviewed you before, and we've had 45-minute, hour-long conversations just about kind of one aspect. So I'm excited, and I'm excited as well to hear from like a nurse who's working in the same field to get kind of their perspective as well. Because yeah, like these kind of things are complicated, and the culture changes that have gone on in the last couple of years are terrifying. Okay, so that's one. We're going to explore worrying trends and things that we've seen that make us frightened, and changes, really drastic changes from our historical free society. What's something that's more hopeful? What's something that you see that's hopeful on the horizon, or now that we're happening, that is happening now?
Mhm. Um, uh, sorry, I have something in my throat.
No, it's okay. Do you want me to pause?
Yeah, pause just for 1 second here. Okay.
And we're back. Go ahead.
So what I find actually most hopeful, ironically, is the actual loss of trust in our institutions. So this loss of trust in government, the loss of trust in our courts and in the medical profession, um, I honestly think is a good thing because I think there's a lot of unearned and not very proper trust that was put in these institutions to protect us. Um, uh, and just as one example of that that I learned about over the course of these last few years is in vaccines.
Mhm.
My eyes, I like to say, were torn open, ripped open
Yeah.
with the COVID vaccines, but that led me to investigate even more into the other vaccines,
Yeah.
and I was horrified at what the data are actually showing, or the lack of data in some cases. But when they actually did find data, which is very hard to find,
Yep.
so many health conditions are linked to childhood vaccines.
Yeah.
SIDS, almost all of the cases happen like
And it's
within a
super.
week or two of getting a vaccine.
And so with COVID, they said if you're 14 days from your shot, you're not vaccinated. And so they hide all of those things by saying these are unvaccinated people. And so this kind of thing is in play in other vaccines as well. And that's scary. That's scary stuff. One of the things that is shocking for me is I was a liberal in 2015.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Jeepers Creepers. And so I believed everything. I believed it all. I was like, man, anti-vaxxers have a right to be an anti-vaxxer if you want to be an anti-vaxxer, but vaccines are safe and effective. And I parroted all the silly talking points. So I think you're right that the mistrust of these institutions, because you can have something like that on autopilot, and it seems like they've taken advantage of it. That is something that is good, and we need to have oversight, but we can't have weaponized colleges that are removing people's ability to speak what they see.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Okay, so what about, and I'm excited to dig in more. I'm writing these down so we can talk about this more on the 15th. We'll get into it more on there. This is just a surface taste. What about most surprising? What's the most surprising thing? And I mean, like, the tyranny, I think, is surprising. But I mean, what about you? You're kind of in the trenches, right? You were celebrated. People were banging pots and pans, and the heroes of the healthcare and all that. And all of a sudden, it's like, CPSO, you've taken things away from me that previously couldn't be taken away, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think on that point, I think I never really bought into that from the beginning. I'm like, I'm not a hero. We're not even doing anything. I think that was part of their ploy to get doctors and nurses on board to
puff them up.
Puff them up so that they'll eventually become the enforcers.
Yep.
I think what really surprised me, and I think this is kind of what I'm grappling with a little bit now in my legal situation, is I thought we had a constitution in Canada.
Yeah.
I thought we had constitutional rights.
Yep.
And now I'm finding out is we never did.
Yep.
Even before, it seemed like we did, but it's written right into the Constitution in Section 1 that all of your rights can be abrogated if they're just demonstrably justified, is the words they use. And it's very much real. Like there's the courts are not enforcing anybody's rights. And so that was one thing I was surprised. I believed in constitutional rights and all of this. And it's like, there is no constitutional rights. There is rights, but it's not coming from that piece of paper.
No, you're right. It is very shocking, really, how completely they ignored our legal system, how completely they ignored the agreement between the governed and the governing, the leadership and their proletariat, the us, the rest of us who are having to live under their rule. I think that it's interesting that our Constitution, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, says that there are checks and balances in place for the removal of these rights. But the reality is there hasn't been an Oakes test. There hasn't been any kind of check and balance. And there isn't it's not forthcoming. They haven't forgotten, like, oh man, we plumb forgot about that. We're going to do that real soon. It's not going to happen. So it is shocking. It is really surprising. Holy smoke. I would love to talk to you for another hour, but we'll have to save that for the 15th. So for everybody watching, join us on the 15th. It'll be a lovely evening. And Dr. Patrick will be there, and more guests. And I can't remember how to say Sarah's last name, and I can't remember the other person's first name at this point in time. So I'm a terrible host, but join us on the 15th. Patrick will be there. I'll be there. Greg will be there. More guests will be there. It will be a lot of fun. We'll see you then. And thanks, Patrick, for joining me today.
I look forward to it.